This is William Jones making videos about leaving religion. The purpose of the videos is to get you to think. Turn your brains on and think, and use logic and use reason, and realize that religion is fake. Alright, for this video I'm doing a continuation of the Genesis, the foundations of Christianity, being Genesis is flawed. So I went from another book on that one. I'm coming from another book today to do this video. So, a lot going on at the present time. The NFL playoffs are going on. It's 2002. I like to watch the NFL playoffs. I like to watch NBA playoffs. I don't like the playoffs for basketball. I watch the whole season for football, but just entertainment. So I'm going to go ahead and do this video. Nothing is rehearsed. I'm freestyling. I'm going to be reading out the book, showing you what the book says, what the experts say. Now this book comes from T.W. Doane, which is called Bible Myths and Their Parallels in Other Religions, Volume 1. And I think I'm going to do a lot of videos based on this book because it goes through a lot of the biblical myths and show their origins, where the Hebrew or Christian writers got their information. It's funny how the Bible says in Ecclesiastes, there is no new thing under the sun, but yet they believe everything in the Bible is original. That was a clue for you right there. It's telling you there is no new thing under the sun. And if you had people like Israel, who were not a seriously ancient people, compared to ancient people, when they did come around, they were not powerful, so they ended up in captivity to the powerful. And if you're in captivity to the powerful, think about this. The slaves that were brought to America, North America, they were taught Christianity. Think about it. They didn't come here with Christianity. It was forced on them. They learned Christianity from those who oppressed them. So let's go back, and if the Israelites were slaves in another place, where would they learn these stories? From those who oppressed them. If they were enslaved in Egypt, as they say, which is not true, you would know the stories of the Egyptians. If you were enslaved under Babylon, you would learn the Babylonian myths. If you were enslaved in Persia, you would learn their myths. In Greek, you will learn their myths. Under Rome, you would know their myths and where they got them from, because the powerful would come in and take control of the myths of those whom they defeated. So for some reason, I don't know why they think all of a sudden their myths are real and original, and they're not. So we're going back to Genesis, and like I said, this is not rehearsed at all. I'm just going to read, show you what I've been reading about, and if those of you want to catch up, we're talking about the, let me recap, because some people coming in right now have not seen some of the other videos. To be clear, there are two creation myths in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. The first creation myth begins in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and ends in Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. The second creation myth begins at Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 and continues on, because the narrative of the second myth runs into the female being beguiled or tricked by the serpent into eating the fruit and then passing it on to Adam. So, but even though scholars have said that the second myth is earlier than the first myth, it's better editing to put the earlier myth first, where it is more structural with Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, 7th day he rested. It's structured that way. There was evening, there was morning, evening, morning, and what he did each day. Whereas the second creation myth doesn't even really talk about the creation of the earth, but kind of goes into, you know, God made man, not man and the woman. He just made man, and then he made the animals, and he made the vegetation and what have you. Had the man name the animals. Later he made the woman. It's structured because that story leads into he made the woman later, which leads into the fall by the so-called deception of the serpent that didn't even lie. He told the truth. So they say the serpent lied, but he didn't. And the first story, there is a Jewish tradition where it says, somebody asked me to mention it. I'm going to mention it here. I can't do a whole video, and I'm going to mention it though, that in the first creation story, it says, God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness and let them have dominion over the earth. It might say more, it'll probably be on the screen, right? So then it says, and he made them man, male and female made he them. So again, if you made male and female, that means there had to be a male deity present, there had to be a female deity present to make what is called man. And that goes back to the Canaanite pantheon, where there was El, the father god, Asherah, the mother god, and they created the 70 children that they had. The most popular of the two are Yahweh and Baal. But in that story, where he made male and female at the same time, no rib was taken, they were both created. Didn't say they were made out of dust, they were both created, is where the Jewish tradition story comes from about a woman named Lilith. Lilith is supposedly, according to the tradition, Adam's first wife. That's Adam's first wife, Lilith. But being that they kind of joined that story with the second story where, you know, the woman is to be submissive to the husband, and according to the tradition, Lilith wasn't with that because why? We were made at the same time. So what puts him over me? And so with that being said, Lilith left the garden. She left. And then later, God sees that, mind you, they're editing the two stories together, and then there's Jewish tradition on top of it. God sees Adam has no mate for himself, so he puts him to sleep, takes a rib out of him, and he makes Eve. And then she's to be submissive to him. Why? Because she was the one that ate the fruit that they were not supposed to eat. And no, it was not an apple. It was fruit. Okay, according to the story. So now Lilith has been demonized. And mind you, in these cultures, there are many different stories. So she's been demonized in a lot of ways, being the mother of demons, or whatever you can imagine that's bad. That's Lilith. Because she was the woman, because you got to remember in the Bible, the first thing they do, you know it's written by man, but the first thing they do in the 3rd chapter is the fall of all creation is because of a woman. So now you have to be subject to your husband, and from this on, from here on in this book, you ain't jack because of what Eve did. You can't preach, can't teach, can't be over a man, nothing, because of what happened way back here. And we know that's just some man stuff. All right? So let me get on with the story here. Let me get on and just read some things about the different myths of where Genesis came from, according to the experts. All right? That's what everything is based off of. You can read it in the Bible for yourself if you want to, you know, freshen up on that as I begin to speak on these things. Now, this is what it says here. And I'm just reading what it says, all right? It says, let me switch my glasses. I put my readers on. It says, after reading the story, it says, before proceeding to show from whence this legend or legends had their origin, we will notice a feature which is very prominent in the narrative and which cannot escape the eye of an observing reader, i.e., the two different and contradictory accounts of the creation. The first of these commences at the first verse of chapter 1st and ends at the 3rd verse of chapter 2nd. The second account commences at the 4th verse of chapter 2nd and continues to the end of the chapter. And speaking of these contradictory accounts of the creation, Dean Stanley says, it is now clear to diligent students of the Bible that the 1st and 2nd chapters of Genesis contain two narratives of the creation, side by side, differing from each other in most every particular of time and place and order. Bishop Colenso, in his very learned work on the Pentateuch, speaking on this subject, says, the following are the most noticeable points of difference between the two cosmogonies. Number 1, in the first, the earth emerges from the waters and is, therefore, saturated with moisture. In the second, the whole face of the ground requires to be moistened. Number 2, in the first, the birds and the beasts are created before man. In the second, man is created before the birds and the beasts. Number 3, in the first, all fowls that fly are made out of the waters. In the second, the fowls of the air are made out of the ground. Number 4, in the first, man is created in the image of God. In the second, man is made of the dust of the ground and merely animated with the breath of life. And it is only after his eating of the forbidden fruit that the Lord God said, behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil. Number 5, in the first, man is made Lord of the whole earth. In the second, he is merely placed in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Number 6, in the first, the man and the woman are created together as the closing and completing work of the whole creation, created also, as it is evidently implied, in the same kind of way, to be the complement of one another, and thus created they are blessed together. In the second, the beast and the birds are created between the man and the woman. First, the man is made of the dust of the ground. He is placed by himself in the garden, charged with a solemn command, and threatened with the curse if he breaks it. Then the beast and the birds are made, and man gives names to them. And lastly, after all this, the woman is made out of one of his ribs, but merely as a helpmate for the man. The fact is that the second account of the creation, together with the story of the fall, is manifestly composed by a different writer altogether from him who wrote the first. This is suggested at once by the circumstance that throughout the first narrative, the Creator is always spoken of by the name Elohim, God, whereas throughout the second account, as well as the story of the fall, he is always called Jehovah Elohim, Lord God, except when the writer seems to abstain for some reason from placing the name Jehovah in the mouth of the serpent. This account naturally for the above contradictions. It would appear that for some reason the productions of the two pens have been here united without any reference to their inconsistencies. Okay, now that's what Bishop Colenso said. He's pointed out all of the differences between the two accounts, showing how it's clearly two different writers. Only people that believe this is historical try to connect the first and second stories, as the editor tried to do, maybe not knowing, that later generations would see, come on man, you made the animals out of water here, you made them out of dust here. That's, come on, how clear can you be? That's different. That's different. Day 6 you make male and female. Over here you don't name a day at all, but you made man. There was no female while you made all the animals, the vegetations, and did what you did, then you made the woman later. How can you miss this? Like he's saying, you can't miss it. These are the facts. The Christian, when I say Christians, I'm talking about mostly the apologists, though the teachers, so-called, will always try to trick people into believing, no, the second is reiterating what the first said. How can you, if the first said the animals was made out of water and the other one said they was made out of dust? It's not the same. They are two different stories. And on top of all of that, the bigger question would be, who was around to witness this, to record it? No one. So that's how we know it's a story. No one witnessed it, and no, a character that didn't exist named Moses didn't write it. No. And no, some God didn't give this story to some man to write down because you wrote it all wrong according to what we know now. It appears that the way you wrote it was according to the people and the way they thought back then. You didn't even make you don't understand that the sun is a star, but there are stars bigger than the sun. But in one day, you made the sun, the moon, and the stars. And stars are in galaxies. Billions of galaxies. Took you one day to make the sun, the moon, and the stars, but took you all these other 4 days to make the earth or clear it up. Clearly, stories. Let us continue. Dr. Kalish, who does his utmost to maintain, as far as his knowledge of the truth will allow, the general historical veracity of this narrative, after speaking of the first account of the creation, says, but now the narrative seems not only to pause, but to go backwards. The grand and powerful climax seems at once broken off, and a languid repetition appears to follow. Another cosmogony is introduced, which, to complete the perplexity, is, in many important features, in direct contradiction to the former. It would be dishonest to conceal these difficulties. It would be weak-mindedness and cowardice. It would be flight instead of combat. It would be an ignoble retreat instead of victory. We confess there is an apparent dissonance. He's clearly saying here that for you to ignore the fact that these two accounts are different is dishonest. He called it weak-mindedness. He called it cowardice. He said it would be flight instead of combat. It would be an ignoble retreat instead of a victory. We confess there is an apparent dissonance. They are not the same stories. So the same foundation of Christianity is not even solid. You haven't even gotten to Noah. We're still in the first 2 chapters of the Bible and the foundation is already cracked. I remember when I was looking at houses before I bought this one, there was another house I wanted because it was in a nice area that I wanted to be in. And I was like, ooh, I would be in this area? And I wanted the house. It had a huge yard, which now I don't want a huge yard. It was a 1-level house. Some of the things were old in the house, but paint and Home Depot, I could have done that. Wasn't a thing. They had even left a stackable washer and dryer in the house. But there was only one problem with that house why I had to decline it. They said the foundation was cracked. And I was so upset because I could have been in that nice area that was well established and had this house for a good price, which I know now is worth a grip, but the foundation was cracked. And anybody knows anything about houses or anything, if the foundation is cracked, it endangers everything you place on it, because the more weight you place on a cracked foundation, it can all crumble. You understand what I'm saying here? Let's continue. Let's continue. And I believe I hope I'm saying some of these names right. Dr. Napar says, the account of the creation from the hand of the priestly author is utterly different from the other narrative, beginning at the 4th verse of Genesis 2. Here we are told that God created heaven and earth in 6 days and rested on the 7th day, obviously with a view to bring out the holiness of the Sabbath in a strong light. Now that we have seen there are two different and contradictory accounts of the creation to be found in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, we will endeavor to learn if there is sufficient reason to believe they are copies of more ancient legends. We have seen that, according to the first account, God divided the work of creation into 6 days. This idea agrees with the ancient Persians. All right, now we're about to get into the different cultures and what these cultures' creation myths said. And mind you, what did he say? He said these ideas agree with that of the ancient Persians. Ancient Persians. So when we're talking about these people, that means these accounts are older than the Genesis account, and we'll just continue to see what they say. All right, watch this. Now, I like this part here. I had already read about this, but I like the detail. Here we go. The Zend Avesta, the sacred writings of the Parsis, states that the supreme being, Ahura Mazda, or Mazd, created the universe and man in 6 successive periods of time in the following order. First, the heavens. Second, the waters. Third, the earth. Fourth, the trees and plants. Fifth, animals. And sixth, man. After the Creator had finished his work, he rested. The Avesta account of the creation is limited to this announcement, but we find a more detailed history of the origin of the human species in the book entitled Bondehesh, dedicated to the exposition of a complete cosmogony. This book states that Ahura Mazda created the first man and woman joined together at the back. After dividing them, he endowed them with motion and activity, placed within them an intelligent soul, and bade them to be humble of heart, to observe the law, to be pure in their thoughts, pure in their speech, pure in their actions. Thus were born Mashaya and Mashayana, the pair from which all human beings are descended. The idea brought out this story of the first human pair having originally formed a single androgynous being with 2 faces, separated later into 2 personalities by the Creator, is to be found in the Genesis account, verse 2. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and named their name Adam. Jewish tradition in the Targum and Talmud, as well among learned rabbis, allege that Adam was created man and woman at the same time, having 2 faces turned in 2 opposite directions and that the Creator separated the feminine half from him in order to make of her a distinct person. Stop. That is that account. Now, reading this account seems like it was totally copied by some other culture that learned this but decided to take it for themselves. And a lot of times, see, that's this thing, even in life, I'm just saying. Sometimes you'll think you'll never run into a person ever again in life. And if I took their story, what would it matter? I mean, we don't know each other. And if I did, then I just claim, hey, I was just saying that your story was the real story. And so I use your story because that was the story, right? Yeah. Not knowing that later this people will be pushed to the side and everybody think it's your story. You did the remix, and later whoever did the original is gone. Ooh, perfect example. Let me show you this with y'all real quick, just to make this point. I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. Okay, one of my favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire songs, if not the most favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire song, is "You Can't Hide Love." You Can't Hide Love. This song is a masterpiece of masterpieces. It is beautiful. It is so beautiful. You can go on YouTube and see how many people covered this song. I mean, Dionne Warwick had it on her album. You got John Legend. You name them, they have covered this song. You go up there and and I mess with my bass guitar, which I really can't play. But how many people play the bass line on You Can't Hide Love? You go to Asia, they were singing it all in a cappella. The song has devastated everyone, and they just redid it recently, Earth, Wind, and Fire, using Lucky Day to sing his own version, but it's like a remix, and they still have Earth, Wind, and Fire in there with Maurice White sampling the song, etc. This is what people don't know about that song. There was a group called, I'm going to Google them right quick. I can edit this video, so. There's a group called Creative Source. Creative Source. This is their song. They are the original group that did the song You Can't Hide Love. And when I tell people this, they're like, what? I say, yeah. So technically, You Can't Hide Love by Earth, Wind, and Fire is a cover. It's a cover from the Creative Source version. And I'll put it on the screen for you, and I will play the original version for anyone, and they'll be like, what? This ain't the same song, until you hear the lyrics. The only thing that's the same in the song is the lyrics. Because Maurice took that song and put his own spin on it and took it from being a song to making it a timeless masterpiece. Timeless masterpiece. So if you ever got time, you go listen to the Creative Source version of You Can't Hide Love and listen to Earth, Wind, and Fire version that everybody can't get enough of. And sometimes I hate to hear it on the radio because I'm stuck for the next 3 weeks listening to the song on repeat uncontrollably. I love the song. So my point is, people love the cover but don't know the original. There is no new thing under the sun. This is always going on. Somebody else created something, somebody else took it and added to it, or they took it and they became more famous with it. But that doesn't change the fact that this still came from here. This is how it works. So we see here where it says with the Parsis in their version, I would have to say they stole this. The Hebrews, or whoever claimed the Hebrews, stole this story from here. But let's continue. Let's just continue. We're not done. We're investigating. All right. Watch this. Next, here we go. The ancient Etruscan legend, according to Delitzsch, is also the same as the Persian. They relate that God created the world in 6,000 years. In the first 1,000, he created the heaven and the earth. In the second, the firmament. In the third, the waters of the earth. In the fourth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. In the fifth, the animals belonging to the earth, water and land. And in the sixth, man alone. Dr. Lishish, who maintains to the utmost the historical truth of the scripture story in Genesis, yet says, whence comes the surprising agreement of the Etruscan and Persian legends with this section? How comes it that the Babylonian cosmogony in Berosus and in Phoenician and in Sanchoniathon, in spite of their fantastical oddity, come in contact with it in remarkable details? After showing some of the similarities in the legends of these different nations, he continues, these are only instances of that which have in common for such an outside account of Israel. We must, however, conclude that the author of Genesis 1 has no vision before him but a tradition. Come on. What did he say? This man, whoever wrote Genesis 1, is not creating anything. He has no divine revelation of anything. Whoever wrote Genesis 1, as he says, however, we conclude that the author of Genesis 1 has no vision before him but a tradition. He's only copied what he's learned from his people, from what they picked up from other cultures where they lived. That's all it is. And it's amazing that this whole thing about Israel, they're only who they are today because of their run-in with Rome, with the Roman-Jewish war that lasted from about 66 to 72 CE, when they refused to worship Caesar. They said, we won't do it. We only worship our God, because by this point in time, they had knocked off all the other gods of the pantheon that they worshiped. They got rid of Asherah and Baal and all the other. They got rid of all the other gods. Now they were just down to just, and they had blended in El with Yahweh. So El is now gone. He got consumed into Yahweh. So now we just got one God. So now we're not going to add any other thing to our worship. So thus starts this war. And because they defeated Rome in a battle, and that's where you get your Flavius Josephus from. He was a general in that war, and he had to help defeat them, but came to a point where Rome cut off their resources, cut off their water, cut off their food, and Josephus surrendered. After all those people committed suicide, that's a whole other story. And he prophesied to Vespasian that he was a prophet, and said, I'm a prophet, and one day, you're going to be the leader of Rome. And then after Nero committed suicide, and they had the wars and what have you, everybody decided Vespasian should be the new Caesar. He was like, I like this kid Josephus. Let's keep him. And added their name onto him, Flavius Josephus, who became a Roman historian. He lived. His works are still here. Even the Christians use it to try to justify that Jesus was historical. He's here. You understand what I'm saying? So they're only famous because of this war. They could have died out like anybody else. And because that Rome saw the influence that their Old Testament, well, their writings, we call them Old Testament now, that their writings had on them, that when they invaded their temple, there was no idols. There were no idols there. They didn't even have the Ark of the Covenant there. They only had this writing that had this total mind grip over the people that caused them to fight for all these years against Rome. So Rome took the book and remixed it. We'll add on to it. They want a Messiah? We'll give them a Messiah. They want a general that will defeat their enemies and put them on top. Strong man, we'll give them one. And they gave him Jesus Christ. If someone smite you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone, someone sues you at the law for your coat, give him your cloak. If someone compels you to go 1 mile, go with them twain. They gave them a passive Messiah that wasn't from the line of David, because it doesn't even mention what line he comes from. There is no line connected to Mary, and Joseph isn't his father. He didn't defeat Rome. He didn't change anything. And in the end, he was murdered, or he was killed. That's not the qualifications of a Messiah. Those are the listings of a myth. That's a myth that was created, which is why the Jewish people to this day don't accept Jesus Christ, because he's not real. Doing magic, turning water into wine, that means nothing. Nothing. And in the end, you were killed. He got killed. And then these people created these fictitious stories. So, all in all, that's why they are famous today, is because they came against Rome, and Rome took their stuff, pimped it by adding the New Testament onto it. Look, the new, they got that, that's the Old Testament, this is the New Testament. Combine the two. I commissioned for 60 books to be made. Put these books out there and teach this. We got the Nicene Creed. This is what Jesus is going to be. Only put books in that canon that line up with the Jesus of the Nicene Creed. And everybody else who goes against it will be called a heretic, hearsay, get out of Rome. You can't live off our sources and benefits. You got to go. It was a power thing. Destroy all the other literature that comes against this, which is why they found the Dead Sea Scrolls hidden in caves. They destroyed anything that came against their writings. That's why they're famous, not because some god had something to do with it. It's all about men, power, and politics. That's what it's all about. Even till today. Men, power, and politics. And here we are reading the stories that they stole. What about who they stole it from? The library at Alexandria was burned down. What was contained in that library? If scholars today could get their hands on the writings that were in the library at Alexandria, the world as we know it today wouldn't be as it is. Because when foreigners came into their country and you had books, give us the book, they copied the book and gave you a copy, and they kept the original. All of that stuff that could trace Christianity back to what it would have been are burned down. And anything else that could trace it back to where it is in the Vatican. But you can't get to it. The Vatican got miles underground of literature. And then they'll tell you, oh, we'll let you see whatever you want to see, but you got to call it by name. But I don't know what it is. Well, then you can't see it unless you call it by name. You can't call something by name that you don't know what it is. Yeah, but if you was in there and you could read Latin or whatever the ancient languages was, you'd find some stuff in there. They know it. They know it so much. Why do our presidents go to the Pope? Why do world leaders go to the Pope? Again, oh, I think I'm dipping off. Let's get back. Let's get back to this. All right. So again, we conclude that the author of Genesis 1 has no vision before him, but a tradition. Let's continue with what the next scholar says. Von Bohlen tells us that the old Chaldean cosmogony is also the same. To continue the Persian legend, we will now show that according to it, after the creation, man was tempted and fell. Kalish and Bishop Colenso tell us of the Persian legend that the first couple lived originally in purity and in innocence. Perpetual happiness was promised them by the Creator if they persevered in their virtue. But an evil demon came to them in the form of a serpent sent by Ahriman, the prince of devils, and gave them fruit of a wonderful tree, which imparted immortality. Evil inclinations then entered their hearts, and all their moral excellence was destroyed. Consequently, they fell and forfeited the eternal happiness for which they were destined. They killed beasts and clothed themselves in skins. The evil demon obtained still more perfect power over their minds and called forth envy, hatred, discord, and rebellion, which raged in the bosom of the families. Wow. Since the above was written by Mr. George Smith of the British Museum, has discovered cuneiform inscriptions which show conclusively that the Babylonians had this legend of the creation of the fall of man some 1,500 years or more before the Hebrews heard of it. The cuneiform inscriptions relating to the Babylonian legend of the creation and the fall of man, which have been discovered by English archaeologists, are not, however, complete. The portion which relate to the tree and the serpent have not been found, but Babylonian gem engravements show that these incidents were evidently a part of the original story. The tree of life in Genesis account appears to correspond with the sacred grove of Anu, which was guarded by a sword turning all the 4 points of the compass. A representation of this sacred tree with an attendant cherub copied from the Assyrian cylinder may be seen in Mr. George's Chaldean accounts of Genesis, figure number 1, which we have taken from the same work. Shows the tree of knowledge, fruit, and the serpent. Mr. Smith says of it, one striking and important specimen of early type in British Museum collection has two figures sitting one each side of a tree, holding out their hands to the fruit, while at the back of one, the woman, is scratched a serpent. We know well that in these early sculptures, none of these figures were chance devices, but all represented events or supposed events and figures in their legends. Thus, it is evident that a form of the story of the fall, similar to that of Genesis, was known in early times in Babylonia. Like, oh boy. So as we see, when Christians, most scholars agree that. That's a lie Christian apologists tell. Most scholars agree that. Which ones? And then when they show you the scholars, guess who they be? Christian scholars. They always show you Christian scholars, Christian apologists, who have a reason to lie or change things to fit a narrative. That's what they do. But as we see here, the Genesis story is not real. It was something I wanted to show, if I can remember what it was. Oh, what was it? Oh, where it said here, let me go back. It said in here, I'm just going to say what it says. It said that they killed beasts and clothed themselves in their skins. That's what it says here. In the older stories, they killed beasts and clothed themselves. Let's go back to the story though. Here we go. Genesis 3:21. Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skin and clothe them. So that was their difference. In the older story, it says that they fell, forfeited the eternal happiness for which they were destined. They killed beasts and clothed themselves. But in the Hebrew version, God killed the animals and made the skins for man, for Adam and Eve. Okay, we'll go in a little bit more. What time is it? I don't know how long I've been doing this. How long I've been doing this? Let me see. What time is it? 8 o'clock. Okay, but that's almost about an hour now. I'm going to do this in sections. I don't want to read too much because there's a lot to edit. You know what? I'm going to stop this one right here. But this is a whole lot. So I'm going to stop this lesson here and continue with the next one. Because, I mean, this book is thick and has a whole lot on this subject about Adam and Eve. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. But understand, people, the Bible is not original at all. And you know what's crazy is, Shaka almost did a video where he went out with a microphone and asked people, what's the oldest book? And he asked black people. And they all said the Bible. What's the oldest book? They said the Bible. Not knowing the Bible is not the oldest book. By far. And especially not an English translation of it. The Bible, come on, it's going through so many translations and versions now. You can read different copies of the Bible that don't say the same thing. Because in fact, when I first got saved when I was 21, and we'd have these home Bible studies at one of my people's house, and I was all into the NIV. And I read that NIV, I would read 12 hours a day or a night, or you want to call however you want to call it. Arsenio Hall used to come on at 11. I got to the point I used to cut Arsenio Hall off, not 12. I said 12, not 12 hours. I would cut him off at 11 o'clock, and I would read from about 11 o'clock at night to maybe about 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning straight. And I had an NIV. And I read this, I read this Bible. And then we had a Bible study one time, and they read something, and they was reading in the King James Version, and I had the NIV, and they read something, and what they said, I said, hey, let me see your Bible. And I held the two Bibles together, and I said, this is not saying the same thing. My word is way more passive than your word. You know? It was like Joel Osteen saying something versus or what's his name, Pastor Geno Jenkins saying something. The two didn't say the same. One was like, we make mistakes. The other one, sin that leads to hell. They didn't say the same thing. I said, this is not hitting the same. So I kept the NIV, but I put it to the side. I went and got me a King James Version. And from that point on, my main Bible was the King James Version. But what my whole point of that is, now we got the Amplified Version and the New King James and the New American Standard Version and the New English Version. There's so many versions where I watch the Christian apologists will skim through all the versions. If we come against something in one verse, to find a verse in one of those versions that says something close to what they wanted to say. That's how desperate they are. That's how desperate they are. You can't, but hold on. So what version do you read? You talk about the ESV, but what version do you read? Oh, now you want to use this version because it makes your point sound better on a Facebook post, but you know that's not what it says. Always remember this, people. Christian apologists lie. They lie. They can't change. They lie. Don't believe them. Why? Because they lie. Okay? So I'm going to end this one right here. This is part 2. Part 3 will be coming soon. And I'll see y'all in the next video. And y'all take care out there. Peace.